Vedic culture primarily focused on gods associated with elemental properties, including Indra, god of lightning and storms, and Agni, god of fire. Through the late centuries BCE, early Brahmanism responded to the challenges of the Shramanic movements, incorporating popular belief systems, philosophical schools, and even ideas from the Shramanic groups such as vegetarianism and ahimsa. However, with the emergence of the Brahminical synthesis during and following the Mauryan Empire and the emergence of the so-called Golden Age of Sanskrit literature under the Northern Gupta dynasty during the 3rd century BCE, there was a shift from the primacy of these Vedic gods to the so-called Hindu trinity: Brahma the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and Shiva the destroyer. In this episode, I will focus on Vaishnavism, the worship of Vishnu as the supreme being, one of the 4 major religious traditions that emerged post the Brahminical synthesis. I will primarily focus on the Vaishnavism which emerged during the late classical period, only briefly touching on the emergence of Tantric and Bhakti strands of Vaishnavism and later Vaishnava traditions which emerged contemporaneous with later developments in Vedanta. Vishnu is originally mentioned in the Vedas as a sun deity. However, he is much less important than other gods like Indra and Agni. In the late 1st millennium, a new religious tradition developed, called Pancharatra, meaning 5 nights, developed around Narayana, the cosmic yogi aspect of Vishnu. Simultaneous to the development of Pancharatra, numerous popular hero cults were developing in India, including the early Bhagavats who worshipped Krishna, one of the protagonists within the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, and the disciples of Rama, the protagonist of the Ramayana. In the late centuries BCE, these cultic traditions amalgamated and integrated with Vedic Brahmanism during the period of the Brahminical synthesis. This synthesis led to the elevation of local and popular gods within the traditional establishment, and probably led to the development of the system of avatars, which will be discussed later. What is certain is that by the early century CE and before the rise of the Gupta dynasty, a distinctive Vaishnavite sect had emerged in India. Vaishnavism thus draws from a variety of textual sources, claiming the traditional Shruti sources, but also popular Smriti works, such as the great epics of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. During the so-called Golden Age of Sanskrit, under the Guptas, many Puranas were dedicated to Vishnu, the 2 most important being the Vishnu and the Bhagavata Puranas. Having discussed the development of Vaishnavism, it is important to answer, who is Vishnu? As mentioned in the introduction, Vishnu is the sustainer, the god who supports all of existence after creation. However, for Vaishnavites, he is also co-equal with Brahman, the world soul and ultimate reality. In Hindu mythology, Vishnu is depicted as being a 4-armed man with a dark blue to black complexion. He wears shark-shaped earrings and has a garland of flowers hanging from his neck, and wears yellow silk trousers. He is usually depicted holding his 4 symbols in his 4 hands: a conch, a lotus, a discus, and a mace. Vishnu is also often depicted riding his mount, Garuda, a legendary part bird, part human creature. Sometimes he is depicted sleeping on the great snake, Shesha, a great primordial being, where he is dreaming all of existence into being. Many Vaishnavites mark themselves with a distinctive tilak, a forehead marking applied as a daily or special ritual. The Vaishnavite tilak is called a Urdhva Pundra. The differing sects of Vaishnavism use different markings as a method to identify themselves and their devotion to a specific tradition. However, a common theme is that the Urdhva Pundra is comprised of 2 or more vertical lines, resembling the letter U. This is meant to represent the feet of Vishnu. One of the most distinctive beliefs, which is common throughout Vaishnavism, is the belief in avatars, which, although present in other traditions within Hinduism, is most prominent in Vaishnavism. Avatar literally means descent, and is used to refer to the material presence or incarnation of a divinity on earth. Vishnu is associated with 10 avatars, called the Dashavatars. These avatars have descended to earth at various times throughout history when Dharma, in this case meaning order, is overturned by evil. The avatar of Vishnu thus empowers good, crushes evil, and restores Dharma to the world. The three most important Dashavatars are the 7th, 8th, and 9th. The 7th avatar of Vishnu is supposed to be Rama from the Ramayana. The 8th is Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita fame, and the 9th is supposed to be Buddha, as in Gautama Siddhartha of the Buddhist tradition. The use of avatars had led some etic scholars to claim that this is a flexible response which allowed Vaishnavism to accommodate popular hero cults in northern India and, in response to the popularity of Buddhism under the Mauryan Empire, even incorporate Buddhism as a Shramanic challenger to the Brahminical system. Some have even argued that this was a contributing factor, along with Muslim invasions from the north, which eventually led to the extinguishment of Buddhism in India. Another impact of the avatar system is that the many sub-traditions of Vaishnavism have splintered into differing directions, often selecting a particular avatar as the center of their worship. In the late classical period, Vaishnavism began to divide into subgroups. One of the earliest subsets of Vaishnavism is called Vaikhanasam, which mixed aspects of Vedic traditions and non-Vedic works to form their own cultic and ritual practices, although it should be noted that they themselves claim to be an orthodox Vedic school. In comparison to later Vaishnava traditions, they focus more on the worship of Vishnu specifically, rather than his avatars. A small sect bearing this name has survived to present in southern India, although their link to the original sect is difficult to verify. Another tradition which branched off and early and co-developed with Vaishnavism at this period was Smartism. The Smarta tradition itself is one of the four major traditions in modern Hinduism, and as such I will treat it in a separate video. Towards the end of the late classical period of India, sometime between the 5th to 10th century CE, a new creative force emerged in Vaishnavism, the Alvars. The name, meaning those immersed in God, was a group of 12 Tamil poet saints from South India who were proponents of bhakti or devotion. Bhakti has existed and had existed as a recognized path within the Brahminic Hindu tradition from an early stage, for instance, the discussions of bhakti yoga within the Bhagavad Gita. However, with the emergence of the Alvars and other bhakti thinkers around the turn of the first millennium CE, the so-called bhakti movement elevated this concept within Indian consciousness. Once again, the bhakti movement is complex, rich, and important to understand with later Indian thought, so I'll treat of it in a separate video. What is key to note is that the Alvars transformed Vaishnavism into a more devotional style movement. From the 10th century, there is an explosion of development within Vaishnavism, with a bewildering number of groups emerging. This explosion was contemporaneous with the developing Bhakti movement, which influenced these emerging traditions. Furthermore, in terms of theology and philosophy, many of these groups were reacting to the Advaita Vedanta system, which had been developed by Adi Shankara around the turn of the 9th century CE. These movements could generally be grouped under 4 sampradayas, or traditions. However, not all Vaishnavat sects fit neatly under these banners. Furthermore, their theology is incredibly diverse, stretching from dualistic to monistic and everything in between. Each sampradaya worships a specific avatar of Vishnu, but beyond this, their differences include varying methods of worship, doctrines, philosophy, and theology. I will now describe these 4 major traditions. However, please note that some of the thinkers in each of these schools will receive their own videos, but I will cover them here in outline only to situate them within the Vaishnavite context. Sri Sampradaya, or Sri Vaishnavism, developed in southern India around the turn of the first millennium CE, drawing heavily on Vedic and Pancharatra texts. Heavily influenced by Alvar poet saints, the Sri Sampradaya sect focuses on Lord Narayan's aspect of Vishnu and claimed that all the gods listed in the Vedas are simply alternate names of Vishnu in this aspect. As such, they claim that the Vedas are dedicated to Vishnu alone. The most influential thinker in this tradition is Ramanuja, who founded the Vishishtadvaita, meaning qualified monism, sect. Although it accepts that Brahman is whole and pantheistic, it also accepts that Brahman is plural and has parts and qualities, which allows for our common sense experience in the world. In more recent times, since the 18th century, the sect has further divided between a northern tradition, which elevates the Sanskrit, Vedic, and Pancharatara texts, and a southern tradition, which focuses on the teachings of the Tamil poet Saint Alvars. It is also believed by some scholars that a branch from Sri Sampradaya includes the Ramananda tradition. This is based upon a Vaishnava saint, Ramanandra, who created an ascetic community around the 14th century CE in northern India. This group focuses its devotion on Ram, as in from the Ramayana, and accepts adherence from all Varna and Jati, making it somewhat of an outlier in the quote-unquote orthodox Hindu movements. Regardless, the Ramananda tradition has much in common with Ramanuja's philosophy and theology, and they remain the largest of the Hindu ascetic movements currently in India. Madhva Sampradaya, also sometimes called Sad Vaishnavism or Bhagavat Sampradaya, refers to the denomination within Vaishnavism founded by the 13th century thinker Madhvacharya. Sometimes it's called Brahma Sampradaya, reflecting the idea by many of its followers that the Vedic truth has descended from Brahma, the creator, uncorrupted through an uninterrupted lineage of gurus. According to Madhva tradition, the creator is superior to the creation, and thus moksha comes only from the grace of Vishnu, but not from our own effort. The tradition is also explicitly dualist, seeing Brahman, true reality, which is associated with Vishnu, Jiva, being the soul, and matter as fundamentally different and thus unable to mix. A subset of the Madhva Sampradaya is Gaudiya Vaishnavism, founded in the late 15th century by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in modern-day West Bengal or Bangladesh. It is a bhakti movement which focuses on the devotional worship of Krishna and his consort Radha. They believe that they are the continuation of the Brahmas Sampradaya, and they are the spiritual soil from which the Hare Krishna movement originated. Hare Krishnaism itself has spread throughout the world, has many celebrity endorsements, and was quite significant in the 1960s counterculture movement in the West. Rudra Sampradaya emerged sometime between the 13th and 15th century CE under the thinker Vishnu Swami, although this is contentious and many faithful date him back several millennia. Vishnu Swami identified Shiva, as in the god of the Shaivites and also known as Rudra, as the foremost Vaishnavi follower. Shiva then sits at the head of a line of gurus, much like Brahma Sampradaya, which continued through to Vishnu Swami. A later thinker in this school is Vallabhacharya, who founded the Shuddhadvaita school, which means purely non-dual. This school describes the self, the Atman or Jiva, as one in substance with God, like the fire and the spark. It thus puts itself at odds with the dualists in the Madhva Brahma school. The final sampradaya is called Nimbarka Sampradaya, named after Nimbarka, a thinker from some time before the 13th century, although his specific dating is once again a topic of fierce debate between scholars as well as believers. This sect focuses on Krishna and Radha as the locus of devotion. The defining feature of this tradition is its adherence to Dvaita Advaita, or dualistic non-dualism. Unlike Ramanuja, who delineated between ultimate reality, souls and matter, and Vallabhacharya, who emphasized complete unity between these substances, Nimbarka argued that although souls and matter are different from God, insofar as they are limited, have capacities and attributes, unlike the ultimate Ishvara, they are dependent on God for existence, and as such form part of the divine, hence dualistic dualism. As I stated before, the four sampradayas fail to catch all contemporary Vaishnavi groups, including the oldest group, the Vaikhanasam. However, in terms of major groups, the most important to not fall under the Sampradaya umbrella are the Sant Mat traditions. Sant Mat, literally meaning teaching of the Sants, were mystic Hindu saints. Like many other mystic and esoteric traditions, the Sant's teachings are defined by individual introspection and devotion to a transcendent divine. The Sant tradition is divided between a northern movement, which uses Hindi, and a southern movement, whose language is Marathi. The southern Sant tradition is commonly called the Warkari tradition. Starting as a bhakti movement focused on the west of peninsular India near modern Maharashtra, the Warkari tradition worships a manifestation of Vishnu or Krishna called Vithoba. The name Warkari literally means one who performs the wari. The wari is an annual pilgrimage to Pandharpur around the middle of the Gregorian calendar year. The tradition was established sometime in the 13th century CE. However, many believe that this dates back earlier to the worship of a local deity, a hero, possibly a manifestation of Shiva, or possibly even a Jain saint. The northern Sant tradition is generally associated with the 15th century poet, mystic, and saint Kabir. His writings were heavily influential on the Bhakti movement, and although he was raised in a Muslim family, he was influenced by his Bhakti Hindu teacher. Followers of the Kabir Panth, or Path of Kabir, devote themselves to Kabir as their guru and means of salvation. Kabir Panth is rather tolerant of ethical and social customs, allowing lay followers to blend in with their local culture. In practice, most Kabir Panthis seem similar to other Vaishnava sects, including the use of sacred threads and sandalwood paste. However, they worship the idol of Kabir as the focus of their devotion. There is controversy over how much influence the Northern Sant tradition and Kabir specifically had over Guru Nanak and the Sikh tradition. Ethics scholars note that Kabir's verses were incorporated into the Adi Granth, the scripture of Sikhism. However, some Sikhs disagree with this characterization and highlight the differences between Sikh and Kabir Panthis in practice and belief. I should note that the creation of Sant traditions did not finish in the late medieval India, but continues through to this day, as clusters of esoteric and mystic movements that have emerged in India, but also in Europe and the Americas. These movements vary considerably in practice, belief, and size, but have considerable bleed with other esoteric and New Age movements, which have gained a prominent following in the West. As such, it is hard to link them back to Vaishnavism, but rather they should be considered as a separate movement. In conclusion, Vaishnavism is a broad label, covering thousands of years and hundreds of millions of followers. Its traditions are numerous and its theology and philosophy are complex. However, it cannot be separated from the later developments in the Vedanta school of Indian philosophy and remains one of the largest and most influential denominations of Hinduism today.